Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombus and Jim Geraghty.
And welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch, along with Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombus of Radio America. We have all good martinis for you today. Good, good, and good across the board, with a lot of thanks to the U.S. Supreme Court. Jim is on his way to do some work with CNN, so he joins us by phone today. Jim, let's start with the decision that's already getting the most attention and probably will the rest of the day. This is the CNBC version of the report. The Supreme Court ruled Tuesday in favor of President Donald Trump in Trump v. Hawaii, the controversial case regarding Trump's September order to restrict travel to the U.S. for citizens of several majority Muslim countries. In the 5-4 opinion penned by Chief Justice John Roberts, the court found that Trump's immigration restriction fell squarely within the president's authority. The court rejected claims that the ban was motivated by religious hostility. Roberts writing in part, quote, "The order is expressly premised on legitimate purposes, preventing entry of nationals who cannot be adequately vetted and inducing other nations to improve their practices," he wrote. The text says nothing about religion. Back to the report, the case has been central to the Trump administration's immigration policy, presenting a key test of the president's campaign promise to restrict immigration and secure America's borders. So a couple of dissents in this case from Breyer and Sotomayor, who's been writing a lot of dissents this spring. That's good, I guess. Jim, this is something that we talked about a lot of times because there's been a lot of different court decisions on this ban and other versions of it. The bottom line is, regardless of whether you like the ban, it's definitely within the president's constitutional power.
Yeah, and it's worth remembering this is what this decision really was about. Was does the president have the authority to enact a policy like this under his previously established powers and authorities on immigration law? It's interesting. I do recall a couple of months ago, Greg, where after one particular defeat at a lower court, the president said, "I should have stuck with the first one," because there was always this question of, all right, so the president has made this pledge, this claim on the campaign trail. How do you actually turn it into a workable policy? And one of the emphasis of the president's White House lawyers and everyone else was to say, well, look, the countries we selected were selected because when we try to check out, is this person a person to be a threat to the United States, ties to terror groups or something like that, that the 7 countries mentioned could not verify the information, either a hostile state like Iran, or just issues of whether there was how much did we trust the reliability of the information coming to us from countries like Sudan or something like that, which was all designed to emphasize this is not about the faith of the person. This is not about the religious beliefs of the person. This is how much can we accurately check out the information that is provided to us, and how much can we verify this from what we're being told by the country on the other side when someone wants to enter the country. Now, quite a few times, the second part of this case was the argument was, look, they're pointing to things the president had tweeted. They were pointing to things the president had said, both on the campaign trail and once in office, to argue this was really driven not out of national security threats or out of an evaluation of security policy, but really driven by a religious animosity, driven by a particular group trying to target one group of people because of their beliefs. The court has rejected this. Now, I suppose, here's the thing. If you're a Democrat and you're mad as heck about this, you do have the ability to change this. You have to take away the statutory authority of the President of the United States. This will not be easy. I'm pretty darn sure that not only would President Trump veto legislation to do that, you'd probably get almost any president who would be, at the very least, not eager to reduce his own authority in this area. Having said that, if Congress wants to do this, Congress could pass, theoretically, veto-proof majorities. But as the laws are written, the president has really broad authority over U.S. immigration policy, and that's what the Supreme Court upheld today.
It certainly did. It was a 5-4 decision. Again, John Roberts writing for the majority. It fell along the traditional lines, as did the case in our second Good Martini. This is from ABC News. The Supreme Court says a California law that forces anti-abortion crisis pregnancy centers to provide information about abortion probably violates the Constitution. The 5-4 ruling Tuesday also cast doubt on similar laws in Hawaii and Illinois. The California law took effect in 2016. It requires centers that are licensed by the state to tell clients about the availability of contraception, abortion, and prenatal care at little or no cost. Centers that are unlicensed were required to post a sign that said so. The court struck down that portion of the law. The centers said they were singled out and forced to deliver a message with which they disagreed. California said the law was needed to let poor women know all of their options. Writing for the majority, again 5-4, Clarence Thomas writing that the centers are likely to succeed in their constitutional challenge to the law. Quote, California cannot co-opt the licensed facilities to deliver its message for it, Thomas wrote for himself and his conservative colleagues, John Roberts, Anthony Kennedy, Sam Alito, and Neil Gorsuch. He called the requirement for unlicensed centers, quote, unjustified and unduly burdensome. Jim, this is obviously a free speech case, and to force pro-life people to deliver the pro-choice message seems to be forcing words into their mouth, and the Supreme Court rightly struck that down.
Yeah, people might say there's a bit of a bitter aftertaste to this good martini because the question is, well, it's great that we won in a 5-4 decision. How come we didn't win 9-0?
Right.
It really does seem like something of a slam dunk. If you're the government, we really want to be very careful about circumstances in which the federal government or even state governments can compel you to say something. You might say, oh, if you have USDA regulations require you to list the ingredients on something. But otherwise, if you don't have to say the Pledge of Allegiance, then I don't really understand why you'd have to say, oh, by the way, here are other options available to you here at this pro-life pregnancy center. It's kind of like saying, well, we know you've come to this place. My assumption is that people would understand what kind of approach they're going to get at a pro-life pregnancy center. I think it's kind of right there, right in that label. I think it'd be pretty obvious what their perspective is going to be. This is, people may not necessarily like this metaphor, but like basically saying, well, you can go to McDonald's or go to Burger King, but if you go to McDonald's employees have to tell you that you have the option of going to the Burger King. Right. I also think these laws kind of summarize, there's kind of an assumption here that women don't know what options are available to them, that they are hapless and helpless, and they need the heavy hand of the state to come in and let them know what options they have. I think that in our free society, with the multitude of information options that are available to everyone of every age, compelling other people to say things that they don't agree with, they don't believe, they don't support, that run the sheer opposite of their values. I noticed, Greg, that there was no law requiring abortion clinics to list the availability of pro-life centers. Interesting. The law didn't require that one, huh? Yeah,
exactly. That was part of the problem, is that the law was so narrowly tailored to these crisis pregnancy centers, particularly ones with a Christian philosophy behind them, that was one of the other reasons that the court thought the law was very, very bad and at least struck down that portion of it. I do believe Planned Parenthood and others are supposedly required to inform people about adoption options, but I'm not entirely certain of that. But
yeah, I mean, my suspicion is that if you head into a Planned Parenthood, you don't expect them to spend a lot of time discussing adoption options. And I'm just kind of curious about the legislators who chose to pass this law, who in all likelihood probably did this. It's a matter of demonstrating their look at how pro-choice I am and look at how I stand up against those mean, nefarious pro-lifers. Were there a lot of women who were going to Christian pregnancy centers and coming out really surprised that they didn't discuss more abortion options?
Right.
I mean, this really is one of those laws where we can kind of scrap the whole thing by saying, what did you expect to find there?
Yes. From the land of imprisoning people for giving out plastic straws, you get laws like this as well. And this one, very chilling, because obviously from a pro-life perspective, you got life and death issues happening here on a regular basis. Jim, as these decisions were released today, David Axelrod, former Obama political guru and White House officials, tweets out, as one after another 5-4 rulings of this Supreme Court of the United States on voting rights, abortion rights, and the travel ban and more are announced, the full meaning of the Senate Majority Leader's unconscionable, nearly year-long blockade against the nomination of Judge Merrick Garland is manifest. And I think, Jim, I probably speak for both of us when I say thank you, Leader McConnell, for your unconscionable, nearly year-long blockade.
Greg, would he have liked it better if they had voted to reject Garland? we could have done that. Nominate somebody else. We don't like him either. Boom. What was the margin? 51-49, 54-46, something like that. We can do this all day, President Obama. you nominate a strict constructionist, maybe we'll consider it. But that's this is the way the Supreme Court judicial game is played now. If you guys wanted to go with this, you could have approved Alito and Roberts, but you didn't. So don't play by one set of rules and then complain that they've suddenly enacted that the same rules are being used against you.
Yes, exactly right. Exactly right. All right. Speaking of David Axelrod, he was one of the first prominent Democrats to actually speak out against the treatment of Sarah Huckabee Sanders and some of these other folks who have been accosted in a very rude way at various restaurants. We talked about that a lot yesterday. But now the Democratic leaders are also talking out about it. That is our third good martini today, although it's worth pointing out that both of them take plenty of shots at President Trump as they denounce Maxine Waters for suggesting that people should do this even more at gasoline stations, as she said, department stores and restaurants and so forth. So Nancy Pelosi yesterday, the House Democratic leader, tweeting out, in the crucial months ahead, we must strive to make America beautiful again. Trump's daily lack of civility has provoked responses that are predictable but unacceptable. As we go forward, we must conduct elections in a way that achieves unity from sea to shining sea, because she never divides anybody. Chuck Schumer on the Senate floor, no one should call for the harassment of political opponents. That's not right. That's not American. Then, of course, he goes on to say, I understand those who are outraged by the hypocrisy of this president when he complains about bullying, harassment, and nastiness when it's used against him or his allies, and he uses it as a regular tool almost every day. He goes on to say the best solution is to win elections. So, Jim, they're spending a lot of time trashing Trump here, but the fact that they actually did issue statements denouncing Maxine Waters is pretty important, given the number of people who seemed to be okay with what she was suggesting when she first said it.
Yeah, it was very much a pleasant surprise. I think the standard default setting for a lot of people in politics, certainly amongst folks on the left, but I think also safe to say amongst a good chunk of folks on the right, is when somebody on your side says or does something rather embarrassing or excessively inflammatory or something like that. Look at your shoes, mumble, and avert your gaze and hope that the controversy blows over. It did not blow over, and both Schumer and Pelosi felt a need to put out a statement. It was not the most loudest or anything, but basically made clear, hey, Maxine Waters, you shouldn't say that. I think we should give them credit for doing the right thing in circumstances like this. Greg, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I've been thinking about, if you encounter somebody in a non-political, non-course of their duties setting. They're not on Capitol Hill. They're not at the White House. They're just either coming into a restaurant, maybe going into a cup of coffee for the Starbucks or something like that. I guess maybe this administration wouldn't get coffee from Starbucks. Maybe there's some other. They're in their civilian life, so to speak. And I remember, Sean Spicer back at the beginning of this administration getting harangued in some Apple store. Now, the guy just wants to buy an iPod, and he's Sean Spicer, right? It's not like yelling at him is necessarily going to change anything. But I was thinking about how this could have gone completely differently if they had just taken a very different approach. And some of it is this, because people are understandably upset about the separation of children at the border or other Trump administration policies. Look, you're free to be upset. You're free to be angry. But I kind of wonder if there are other ways to communicate the same message in a way that doesn't seemingly inevitably lead to an escalation and potential violence. Imagine if the wait staff at that restaurant let Sarah Huckabee Sanders and her family sit at the table, order their food, and while they're waiting for the food, instead of yelling at them or berating them or sneering or, I've heard some people urging spitting in their food or something completely awful like that, I'm just picturing them, Greg, singing something like Neil Diamond's Coming to America, kind of to say, hey, we support, we welcome these immigrants, something that had been non-angry, non-sneering, you are the worst or something like that, but simply had been affirmative. No, we believe these people should be allowed to stay here. We believe immigrants are good, whether they're legal or illegal. You and I might see that issue differently, but at the very least, you could express your viewpoint in a way that does not automatically lead to escalation. My suspicion is that if they'd done something like this, even Sarah Huckabee Sanders would have to chuckle or something like that. So there's this philosophy. What kind of approach do you want to have? Look, if you see somebody, you think they're wrong, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm going to share a tale. I believe at the height of impeachment, when Peter King, the congressman from New York, announced that he was deviating from the party, the rest of the Republicans, and he was not going to support impeachment. My uncle, a right-of-center gentleman, happened to go to the same dentist as Congressman Peter King. And he walks by one of the rooms at the completion of his visit to the dentist, and lo and behold, who does he see but Peter King sitting there in the chair, getting his teeth cleaned or something like that. My suspicion is that Congressman Peter King would have preferred the root canal to listening to my uncle yell at him. I don't know if he yelled at him. He in trademark Geraghty fashion, gave him a piece of his mind or something like that. So look, when you see somebody you disagree with strongly in politics in public life, I understand the temptation to give them a piece of their mind or at least say something like that. And look, it's a free country and you're free to do that. But think about how you encounter them, because my suspicion is the nastier you are, the more you froth at the mouth, the more they're going to think, well, the people who disagree with me are crazy, horrible, unhinged people, and there's no point in listening to them. The more respectfully or the more you defy the image of the unhinged opposition, the more they're going to have to listen to you. And my suspicion is this is the more likely you are to actually persuade them or at least have an impact on them at that random chance encounter or something like that. But anyway, Pelosi and Schumer actually came out and did the right thing. And I think, again, I don't know if this will actually bring down the temperature that much in our politics, but they deserve credit for at least attempting to say, hey, as much as we strongly agree with the President Trump and the administration and his supporters, some things are crossing the line and out of bounds. And I'm glad they said what they said.
Just to clarify, Jim, did your uncle keep the topic entirely on impeachment, or did he bring up the IRA?
Good question. I guess it's probably not that second one, but that would have been my first one, We got to get tough on terrorism unless they have the right kind of last name, huh?
Yes, except for Sinn Féin. Anyway, that's supposedly resolved now, so that's good. No thanks to Peter King. Jim, have a great day, and we'll talk again soon.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombus of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today, and tune in again on Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.